When the empath finally stops pursuing their twin flame, something very precise occurs within the energetic connection between them. It is not anger, it is not surrender, and it is not emotional detachment. Instead, it is an alchemical shift that completely alters the rules of the dynamic they were engaged in. Most people misunderstand what it truly means to be an empath within the twin flame experience. They assume it is simply someone who is emotionally sensitive, deeply caring, or highly empathetic. In reality, it is far more complex and far more intense than that. In the twin flame journey, the empath is the one who holds the full memory of the soul agreement, often without conscious awareness. Meanwhile, the partner operating from the avoidant polarity frequently suppresses, denies, or forgets this spiritual understanding. The empath, however, remembers. They sense every unspoken element of that agreement resonating through their entire being. They recognize, within the other's eyes, a soul they were connected to before either entered this lifetime. Yet there comes a specific moment, a point of rupture that cannot be predicted or prevented, when something within the empath abruptly turns off. This is not a deliberate choice. It is not the outcome of therapy, healing practices, or spiritual discipline. It is a spontaneous psychological and energetic collapse, where the part of them that prioritized the connection above everything else simply disappears. When this shift occurs, when the empath genuinely stops chasing, 5 significant changes begin to unfold within the twin flame dynamic. If you are currently experiencing this, if you are the empath who has invested years trying to sustain the connection, subscribe to the channel. What follows will fundamentally change how you understand this journey. And if you stay until the end, you will see why stopping the chase is not the conclusion, but the true beginning of awakening. This connection was always intended to act as a catalyst. But before understanding what happens after the empath stops chasing, it is essential to recognize the energetic trap that allowed this pattern to persist for so long. The empath believes they are chasing out of love. In truth, they are chasing because they fear confronting the possibility that the soul agreement may not unfold as they envisioned. They fear that the suffering, the waiting, and the enforced personal growth may have served no purpose. They fear that letting go of belief in the connection would mean admitting they misinterpreted their own intuition. This realization does not come easily. For years, the empath frames the pursuit as spiritual devotion. Every minor sign from the universe is treated as validation to continue waiting. Every coincidence is interpreted as proof that reunion is imminent. They assign profound meaning to dreams, repeating numbers, familiar songs playing at precise moments. This interpretation is not entirely incorrect, but it is dangerously incomplete. What the empath cannot perceive while they are still chasing is the crucial difference between honoring a soul agreement and becoming imprisoned by it. There is a clear distinction between having faith in the connection and completely sacrificing oneself for it. There is a clear distinction between unconditional love and tolerating behaviors that compromise your integrity. This difference only becomes obvious when the pursuit finally ends. During the period of chasing, an empath often develops behaviors that may appear virtuous but are, in reality, deeply self-destructive. They become skilled at interpreting small gestures of attention as grand demonstrations of love. They frame inconsistency as spiritual depth and turn emotional neglect into tests they must endure. They justify cruelty as wounds that require patience and understanding to heal. Each of these justifications pulls them further into a dynamic that gradually erodes their sense of self. In this state, the empath often builds an identity around suffering for the connection. They take pride in enduring, waiting, and forgiving without limit. They compare themselves to those who abandon difficult relationships, feeling a sense of superiority through their persistence. Suffering becomes proof that their love is purer, more evolved, and spiritually elevated. This identity can become so central that letting go of the pursuit feels like abandoning their own self. The harsh reality few acknowledge is that while an empath is chasing, they are not truly loving the other person. They are in love with an idea, the potential they see, the version they believe the person could become. They are invested in the soul contract rather than the actual individual before them. Their focus is more on the connection than on themselves or the other person. This kind of love, even when couched in spiritual terms, is essentially an attachment that blocks real growth. When the empath finally stops pursuing, they experience what depth psychology describes as the return of invested energy. While chasing, the empath projects vast amounts of their life force toward the avoidant partner, thinking about them, feeling for them, attempting to understand them, holding space emotionally. This sustained projection of energy creates a bond that acts like a psychic umbilical cord, tethering them in ways that limit their freedom and self-realization. When the pursuit ends, that energetic cord breaks, and all the energy that had been directed outward, trying to reach or change the other person, suddenly flows back to the empath. It's as if they had been living with only half of their own life force, and now they can access the full extent of their personal power. The shift is often so profound that it feels like a physical awakening, not just an emotional or spiritual one. An empath might wake up one day feeling they can breathe fully for the first time in years. Looking in the mirror, they may see their own eyes with a clarity they had forgotten was possible. Walking down the street, they feel grounded in their body in a way they haven't experienced since before meeting the twin flame. It's a return to themselves that is both liberating and unsettling, revealing how much of their own identity they had sacrificed in maintaining the connection. This energy return is not just a subjective experience. It produces tangible effects in the empath's life. Projects that had stalled begin to progress. Opportunities that seemed blocked suddenly appear. New people enter their life, bringing possibilities that were previously invisible. It's as if the universe had been waiting for the empath to stop investing all their energy into a dynamic that didn't foster mutual growth, allowing that energy to redirect into more productive avenues. The return of energy often comes with an initial period of disorientation. The empath may have been so defined by the chase and the connection with the twin flame that, when it ends, they temporarily lose a sense of identity. They may wake up unsure of how to structure their day, without messages to send, signs to interpret, or behaviors to analyze. There may be a void where obsession once existed, but this emptiness is not a loss. It's space being created for something new to emerge. The second shift can be even more striking to those observing it. The empath develops a form of compassionate indifference toward the avoidant. This is not the cold, resentful indifference of someone seeking revenge. It is deeper and more unsettling. The ability to perceive the other person with absolute clarity, recognize their patterns and limitations fully, approach their journey with genuine compassion, but remain emotionally detached from the outcome. This kind of compassionate indifference often leaves the avoidant completely unsettled. They are accustomed to only two types of empaths: one who pursues them with overwhelming emotion, and one who pretends to be indifferent while secretly waiting and observing. When they encounter an empath who truly needs nothing from them, who can speak politely yet without attachment, and sincerely wishes them well from a distance, the avoidant has no reference point for processing it. Previously, the empath's pursuit gave the avoidant power because they could always return to unconditional love. No matter how far they pulled away or how often they broke promises, the empath's infinite forgiveness and understanding were guaranteed. But when the empath embodies compassionate indifference, the dynamic of power disappears. The avoidant suddenly faces someone who knows them intimately but no longer desires them, creating a cognitive dissonance they cannot easily resolve. This shift also transforms how the empath navigates shared social spaces. If they have mutual friends, frequent the same places, or cross paths in life, the empath no longer needs to avoid encounters or manufacture drama. They can be in the same room, greet sincerely, and even engage in superficial conversation without internal emotional turbulence. This authentic calm unsettles the avoidant far more than anger or visible hurt ever could. A common phenomenon occurs during this phase. Feeling the absence of always available emotional energy, the avoidant often tries to reignite the chase. They may send casual messages as if nothing happened, appear in expected locations, probe through mutual friends, or even create minor crises to trigger the empath's caretaking instincts. Yet the empath practicing compassionate indifference does not respond to these attempts, not because they are trying to be strategic or engage in power dynamics, but because they genuinely no longer feel compelled to respond. They may reply politely when appropriate, yet without the intense emotional charge that once accompanied every interaction. They can notice attempts at manipulation without reacting with anger. They can observe old patterns repeating without getting drawn into them. This lack of reaction can be deeply confusing for the avoidant partner who is accustomed to always eliciting an emotional response. The third development can be described as the awakening of energetic discernment. When the empath stops pursuing their twin flame, they acquire a near supernatural ability to sense the energy dynamics in all their relationships. The experience of having invested so much in a connection that wasn't reciprocal seems to have fine-tuned their internal awareness, enabling them to detect genuine reciprocity versus exploitation with remarkable precision. This discernment shows up in very practical ways. The empath can recognize within the first few minutes of meeting someone whether that person is genuinely seeking mutual connection or simply using them as an emotional resource. They can tell when someone is fully present versus when they are merely performing presence. They can differentiate between authentic vulnerability and manipulation disguised as vulnerability. Patterns of behavior they once tolerated are now immediately recognized as red flags. This heightened awareness transforms all of the empath's relationships, not just the connection with the twin flame. Friendships that were previously one-sided become unsustainable. Family dynamics, where the empath consistently acted as the non-reciprocal caretaker, begin to be questioned and redefined. New romantic relationships are assessed with much stricter criteria. The empath gains something they lacked before, the conscious ability to choose where to invest their energy based on true reciprocity rather than imagined potential. Energetic discernment also allows them to perceive when someone is operating within a soul contract versus when they are engaged in an ordinary relationship. They can identify other empaths caught in similar pursuit patterns and often feel compelled to share their insights, helping others avoid losing as much of themselves as they once did. Perhaps the most valuable aspect of this discernment is the ability to see their own motivations with unflinching honesty. The empath no longer deceives themselves about why they maintain certain connections or take certain actions. They no longer justify behaviors that compromise their integrity using spiritual reasoning. Fear of abandonment is no longer disguised as the spiritual virtue of infinite patience. They see themselves with the same clarity they now see others, and this insight is both liberating and empowering. This sharpened discernment also transforms how the empath receives and processes advice from others, making them more conscious and selective about the guidance they choose to follow. During the period of chasing, empaths often relied heavily on external validation to justify continuing the pursuit. They consulted psychics, read tarot cards, and asked friends if the connection still had potential, and there was almost always someone ready to say what they wanted to hear. Intuitive people sense the empath's pain and naturally offer hope. However, empaths who have cultivated energetic discernment no longer depend on this kind of validation. They learn to trust their own perception, distinguishing clearly between what is real and what is illusion. The fourth transformation can be described as the rebirth of the individual mission. Throughout the chase, empaths often merge their life purpose with the twin flame connection. They believe their growth and contribution to the world hinge on making this union work. But when they stop chasing and the energy shifts, they discover something unexpected. Their mission is entirely independent and had been obscured by their obsession with the twin flame. This rebirth is not an instant revelation, but a gradual awakening. Empaths start to reconnect with passions, interests, and callings that existed before the twin flame appeared, talents or pursuits that were neglected during the chase. It could be an abandoned artistic pursuit, a professional goal that was indefinitely delayed, or a spiritual or community calling set aside in favor of focusing on the romantic connection. As these dormant aspects awaken, empaths gain a profound sense of purpose that doesn't rely on anyone else. They realize they can create meaning, impact the world, and live a fulfilling life entirely on their own. This realization transforms them deeply because it dissolves the core belief that fueled the chase, that they were incomplete without the twin flame. The rebirth of individual mission also often brings a shift in perspective about the twin flame itself. Empaths begin to see that the connection may never have been meant to create a lasting romantic union. Its purpose could have been to catalyze growth and awakening, triggered by the intensity of pain and transformation unique to this connection. The twin flame may have entered their life to break them down completely, forcing them to rebuild into a more authentic, empowered version of themselves before leaving, allowing them to fully inhabit the person they became through the process. This perspective does not deny the reality of the connection or diminish what was felt, but it frames it within a broader narrative. The union was not the end goal, but a means to a greater purpose, the full individuation of both souls. When the empath can embrace this view and feel gratitude for the connection, even if it doesn't manifest as imagined, a profound internal shift occurs. A critical part of this rebirth is the development of a primary relationship with themselves. For the first time, empaths may prioritize their own needs, desires, and well-being without guilt or justification. They learn to ask themselves what they want, rather than focusing on the twin flame's needs or on making the connection work. They cultivate the ability to make choices that nurture their soul, even when such choices might appear selfish to outsiders unaware of the sacrifices they had made for others. The fifth and most remarkable transformation is the emergence of what can be called an autonomous magnetic presence. This occurs when the empath finally stops projecting the energy of need, incompleteness, or seeking that marked their behavior during the entire chasing phase. Instead, they begin to radiate something entirely different: completeness, self-sufficiency, and wholeness that does not rely on external validation. This shift in presence has a paradoxical effect on the twin flame dynamic. During the chase, the empath emitted an energetic frequency that resembled neediness. It was as if they were constantly signaling, "I need you to complete me. I need your validation. I need you to give meaning to my pain." even when cloaked in unconditional love or spiritual patience. This frequency unconsciously repelled the avoidant, triggering fears of being consumed or losing themselves in the other's need. However, when the empath develops an autonomous magnetic presence, their energetic output changes entirely. They now communicate, "I am complete within myself. My life is full and satisfying. I need nothing from you to feel whole." Paradoxically, it is precisely this self-sufficient frequency that awakens interest in the avoidant, interest that did not exist before. This shift is not a manipulation or psychological tactic, but a natural alignment with the correct energetic polarity. This presence is reflected across all areas of the empath's life. They walk with groundedness that was previously absent, speak with quiet authority that needs no validation, relate to others from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, and make choices that honor their own truth rather than seeking approval. As a result, the empath attracts relationships and opportunities of a higher quality, connections based on mutual respect, partnerships drawn to their strength instead of unlimited emotional availability, and situations that honor their complexity rather than exploiting their caretaking. The transformation also shows in how the empath occupies physical space. During the chase, they often minimize themselves, taking less space, avoiding attention, and bending to others' plans. After developing true autonomy, they occupy space confidently, sit in the central chair, express their preferences, and claim the right to exist fully without shrinking for others' comfort. At this stage, something unexpected often occurs. The avoidant, the twin flame who was previously being chased, begins to notice what they have lost. This awareness doesn't happen immediately, but after experiencing the absence of a presence that was once always available. When they finally recognize this lack, they may attempt to return. It is crucial to understand, however, that when they come back, they are not encountering the same person they left. They meet the empath who has undergone a profound transformation, someone who has experienced a symbolic death and rebirth, gained new capacities, and no longer depends on them for completeness. This evolved empath responds to their return in a completely different way. They neither reject the avoidant with anger nor welcome them with the desperate forgiveness of the past. Instead of reacting impulsively, they assess the situation with the discernment they have developed. They don't question whether the connection still exists, because a soul connection never truly disappears. Instead, they ask whether the avoidant has genuinely done the inner work required to maintain a healthy relationship, or if they are simply responding to the empath's shifted energy. They consider whether true reciprocity is being offered, or if it's just a familiar pattern repackaged differently. Here's a truth rarely discussed: even when the avoidant comes back, even when they show real change, even when they give everything the empath once wished for, the empath may find that they no longer want it in the same way. Not because love has faded, but because the process of letting go has transformed them completely. They are no longer the person who relied on that union to feel whole. This doesn't mean reconciliation is impossible. It means that if it occurs, it must be built on an entirely new foundation. It requires two complete individuals consciously choosing to share their completeness, not two halves attempting to become whole through one another. It must be grounded in consistent, tangible reciprocity, not in imagined potential or promises of future change. The empath who undergoes this transformation gains insight into a fundamental truth about soul contracts that most people miss. Sometimes the fulfillment of a contract looks nothing like what we imagined. Sometimes it's meant to break you entirely so you can rebuild stronger. Sometimes it teaches you to love so profoundly that you also learn to love yourself with the same intensity. Sometimes it pushes you to develop inner resources you wouldn't have built if life had been easy. And sometimes, perhaps, the contract always included the possibility that you wouldn't remain together in this lifetime. The separation may not be a failure. It may be the contract's precise fulfillment. You were meant to meet, recognize each other, love with impossible intensity, challenge each other in the ways necessary for growth, and then walk separate paths, carrying with you the transformation only this connection could spark. This idea is often hard for the empath to accept because they've invested so much in the belief that twin flames are meant to stay together. Yet, the deepest teachings about soulmates never guaranteed a permanent union in this lifetime. What they promised was that the meeting would be transformative in ways beyond ordinary understanding. When you fully embrace this truth, when you stop clinging to how things should be and accept how they are, a profound peace emerges. An empath who reaches this level isn't waiting for the avoidant to awaken or return. They aren't observing their spiritual growth from afar, nor are they holding a reserved place in their heart for a possible reunion. They are living fully, intensely, and honoring the transformation the connection brought, without being confined by the story of how it should have unfolded. This is the ultimate freedom that comes when you stop the chase, the freedom to live your life as it is, not as you imagined it when you first met your twin flame. The freedom to love deeply without losing yourself, to honor sacred connections without being enslaved by them, and to feel complete without needing validation from anyone else. There's a dimension of this transformation that's often overlooked but essential for understanding. The empath who stops chasing may realize they weren't just freed from this particular twin flame dynamic, they were freed from an older, repeating pattern. They see that the chase didn't begin with this person. It's a pattern that appeared throughout their life, and perhaps across lifetimes. The pattern of seeking love where it isn't available, of trying to be enough, to be chosen, of believing their worth depends on transforming someone unwilling to change. When this archetypal pattern finally breaks, its impact resonates through the empath's entire life. Past relationships suddenly make sense in a new way. Family dynamics that once seemed confusing reveal themselves as variations of the same theme. Choices that felt mysterious now appear logical within this pattern. Most importantly, the empath gains the power to consciously choose a different path going forward. There's one final truth about this journey, revealed only when you've truly stopped chasing. You realize you were never chasing the other person. You were chasing a version of yourself that could only emerge through the challenges of this connection. You were pursuing growth in ways your soul knew it needed, even if your ego resisted. The twin flame was merely the catalyst. The real work was always yours. The journey was always about becoming who you were meant to be in this life. Sometimes, the greatest gift someone can give you is to love you so intensely that it shatters you, then reject you so clearly that you must rebuild yourself in ways you never could have if you had stayed together. When you reach this understanding, you stop seeing the avoidant as a villain or a victim. You stop seeing yourself as a martyr. You can look at the entire journey, the pain, the beauty, and acknowledge that it had to happen exactly this way for you to become who you are now. Who you are now is worth every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of pain endured along the way. If you are going through this process, whether you've stopped chasing or are considering it, know this: on the other side of this ending exists a rebirth you can't yet imagine. A version of you so powerful, so clear, so complete, that looking back, you'll be grateful for everything, even the parts that nearly destroyed you. This rebirth cannot be rushed or forced. It doesn't happen just because you watch a video or decide to stop chasing as a strategy to bring the avoidant back. It happens when a part of you truly dies, when you no longer have the energy to invest in a relationship that drains you. It happens when you finally choose yourself, not because you think you should, but because you have no other choice. If these words resonate with you, type in the comments, "I choose my own wholeness." This isn't just a comment, it's an energetic declaration to the universe that you're ready to stop chasing and start truly living. If you want practical tools to support this transformation, I offer 2 resources that can help profoundly. 21 Days of Transformation and How to Manifest Your Twin Flame. Links are in the first pinned comment. Thank you for having the courage to face this truth without turning away. See you in the next video.